Greg, what, in your
Yes.
estimation, would be the ideal engine swap for a Mark IV Toyota Supra, discounting what you already know about what we're going to get into, but what would you say would be the best engine, and we're just going to leave the other engine we're talking about out?
Yeah, so the best engine for a Mark IV Supra swap. Ooh, best is a very subjective term in this
If
sense,
you had a Mark IV
but
Supra and you didn't
yeah,
say want a 2J, or let's just say you got one sans engine or what have you, what
okay.
engine are you putting into it and why?
Well, I can think of three different engines that I would put into it. One of them probably being that's rising to the top just because of how sacrilegious it would be. First and foremost, I would probably put an RB26 in it just because that would be funny to watch every Supra fanboy's mind and face melt as I opened the hood at every car show I went to. I think that would just be very funny and an excellent troll car, but also still a very good
It's
car
actually been
because
done.
those are excellent engines. I know. I just think it should be hilarious. Second would be some form of V8 based on just because of packaging. Maybe an LS would be cool in there, just because LS Mark IV Supras, I haven't seen a lot of them. I know they've done it, but I personally have not seen a lot of them. If there's room, maybe a Coyote, or maybe even some form of other like interesting V8. If you had the potential to build one out, maybe that Yamaha 4.4 liter that they threw in the Volvos, because they also use those for Aussie supercar racing. So very cool engine, pretty stout engine. So that would be pretty interesting. Or maybe even like a V8 Vantage kind of engine, like an Aston or an AJ block kind of thing, maybe from Jag. And lastly, probably a V10, maybe something out of like an Audi R8 or a Lamborghini. Those would also be pretty interesting to do. Personally, I'd do the RB26 just because they sound cool, and again, it would just be a great sort of troll car to be like, oh yeah, man, let me see the 2JZ. And it's an RB26, and everyone freaks out.
No, I'm pretty close to there with you. I would some form of American V8 because, like, let's face it, guys are having a lot of fun. I've seen 2Js in Mustangs. I've seen 2Js in Corvettes. I've seen 2Js.
Yep.
Everybody wants to slap a 2J into everything.
Everything.
I think it would be funny to go the opposite route. Now, I know the LS Supra has been done.
K-swap.
Steve says put an EJ in there. Just, legendary Toyota reliability, and then head gaskets on the garage floor. I'd probably go the V8 route. I think a Coyote would be epic. Problem with the Coyote and everything is making it fit would be interesting. Then I would go something like an LS. I think a Hellcat would just be hilarious. Just, again, because
That would be ridiculous.
it's just blatantly just bludgeoning over the death with Americanness. If I was to kind of keep it in the family, a 1UZ VVTi would be really, really cool. So here's the thing with the Mark IV. When they raced them in the Japanese touring car series, at no point did they ever race them with a six-cylinder.
Right, they've always had V8.
Originally, they were, I think, either a 3S GTE or a 4A GTE or 4S GTE. I can't remember off the top of my head, but originally it was a four-cylinder. And then after that, they went to a 4-liter V8 that I don't know how much it shared with the 1UZ as far as that, but it was a V8. So I would probably go those routes. However, one of the engines...
We found something better than all of that.
Yes, one of the engines that have kind of been rising to the top of things I would like to play with, and unfortunately, it's not a VR6, is the 1G.
Hello, Andrew.
The 1GZ FE. And to those of you who don't know what that is, I'll put a picture of it actually in the Supra up right now. That is a 1GZ FE. If you count the intake runners, you'll notice there is 12 of them. It is Toyota's V12. They are kind of interesting engines, but in their stock form, they're just basically, it's that mindset of a six-cylinder is inherently very smooth. A V12 is inherently very, very smooth just because of the firing order and the pulses and everything like that.
Yeah,
so this
same thing with like the S class with the V12s.
Exactly. It's why Rolls goes 12, sometimes 16 cylinders
Right.
in their vehicles. So it was just in the Toyota Century. Think Toyota Avalon, but just more of it's what the bosses
Yeah.
of Toyota were driven around in. It was just a very smooth engine for luxury cars. So, as in most things, people started picking them up and like, well, it's 5 liters. And before anyone asks, no, it is not 5 liters because it's 2 1Js bolted to, put in a V configuration. It is actually completely different from a design perspective, other than just the overall displacement per bank. The interesting thing about it is that it had 2 ECUs running each bank that worked in conjunction with each other. So you could legitimately, it wasn't advisable. It's not like today's engines where you can turn cylinders off. But in theory, one bank would continuously run if the other ECU failed. It was just the tech. They were limited by the tech of the day. I'm pretty sure this guy left no pie cuts in whatever state he was when he built this. Everything is everything.
The
intake,
the piping work is absolutely glorious. It's gorgeous.
Yeah, it's a beautiful engine bay, and we'll notice that we strapped 2 turbos on it because these engines, again, there's not really a huge.
Why not?
There's not really a huge aftermarket for them. So I know one guy built one of these with ITBs. Got like 500-ish wheel horsepower out of it. A glorious noise. But this makes an even better noise, and it has turbos. So I think the fair thing to do is to just close this window and just move on to it. No, I'm just screwing with you guys. It's idle. This is actually the tuning session.
Yeah.
I love that pink color too, by the way.
Do we need to mute me so they can hear?
So, yeah, that is epic sounding. Greg, you're unmuted. So these engines don't have that, high... I don't know what the word is. That instantly recognizable V12 sound. We just missed another poll. That's just the base tuned 700 horsepower. That is the best sounding Supra that has ever existed, and I think an unmuted Greg will agree.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome.
I mean, and it has that F1 pitch at the very top end of it that sometimes you get the V12s and it sounds very reminiscent of a very good straight 6 just in harmony. But that is that peaky 12.
It's pretty nuts. It's probably one of the better sounding swaps I've ever heard, honestly. Because when you put turbos on anything, you're gonna mute it. It's just the way it works. But in this case, you still get a ton of the V12 howl, which is really glorious. And it's one of those things where it's like, yeah, give me money. I'll do that. You don't need to convince me any more than one of those sound clips.
Yes.
What I'm interested in is there can't be a stock body on that. It looks like the rear quarters are definitely wide body-ish.
No, that's not a stock bodied car.
I didn't think so.
I forget the kit. Check my notes. Nope, they just talk about the engine.
Yeah, there you go.
The fenders are, I'm pretty sure it's all Supra except for the undercarriage. Might have over fenders that have been blended. But since we're here again, we're just going to give the people what they want and... So that is just... So what this thing actually ended up making on the dyno was just shy of 1,000 horsepower. It was 946 and 817 pound-feet of torque at the rear hubs, which is basically an accurate way of dynoing. It's also very good for shops because it's modular and things like that. Obviously, to make this power, custom pistons custom connecting rods, custom one-off. Although I do believe that some people are starting to make aftermarket engine components for this because it is coming up in popularity. One of the guys from Top Secret actually did this build initially. This guy is just sort of...
Smokey?
I think so.
Smokey Nagata, yeah.
He did that swap initially, and literally everything had to be custom. But as these engines, like, because, let's face it, everybody went to the 2J because it was cheap. Everybody then went to the 1J because the 2J was getting too expensive. Now that both of those are climbing in price, this thing has kind of become the new, what can we do with it? Sort of plaything.
Yeah.
And I never mentioned the craziest part of this build. The craziest thing about this Supra, and yes, I understand it has a twin-turbo V12 that makes well over 1,000 horsepower at the crank. It has...
which isn't the craziest part, apparently.
Nope. For my money, the craziest thing is, and this kind of piggybacks on what you were saying earlier about what engine you'd put in it. You would put an RB26 in it because it would mess with people. If you really wanted to mess with people, you do an RB30 with RB26 heads, but I digress. The craziest thing about this car is that it has a Tessa, a.k.a. all-wheel drive.
Yeah, basically 1,000 horsepower Supra all-wheel drive. That's pretty bananas, gotta be honest.
I mean, that is insane. And to those of you eagle-eyed viewers who said, but the hubs were only hooked up to the rear wheels. Well, in a Tessa, you can actually turn off the front.
Yep.
So it can be just a rear-wheel drive vehicle. I have wanted to play around with the 1GZ for a while. I believe I even said, hey, why don't we put this in my IS300? Back when the IS300
yeah, you definitely said
was the project. That engine is so cool because of what it represents. It's affordable, and it's a V-freaking-12.
Yeah.